Hi, Scott. Thanks so much for joining myself and Rob on the Hart Square podcast today. As you know, we're going to have a bit of a chat around designing and creating good digital experiences. It'd be really great to get all your thoughts and insights on this topic. But before we dive in, it would be great if you're able to tell us a bit about yourself, your role, and a bit about TPX Impact as well, please.
Sure. Pleasure to be here. I glory under the highfalutin title of Chief Experience Officer. What the hell does that mean? It means that I work within the digital experience part of TPXimpact. TPXimpact being a fairly recent organization, actually. It's a number of agencies and agency names that you may recognize who were orientated around more social purpose and tech and design for good type purposes. Things like FutureGov, things like Manifesto and Decent, agencies like that. Some 15 plus companies all under one roof as TPXimpact now. Really interesting setup. And essentially we're covering things like organizational change and organizational design, obviously a huge underpinning of technology and engineering and data, digital experience, which is the part that I'm in, things like enterprise applications and things like managed services as well are very much part of the remit. So a kind of soup to nuts kind of holdco setup. But again, all orientated as per the name around impact and better purposes for design and tech. My background, I have been in and out of agencies for 30 plus years now. I tend to describe myself as BC, so before computers. That's how old I am. So I trained in design. So when I trained in design, we were still moving great big blocks of type around and things like that. But I got into tech very early through my first few gigs, which were around exhibition design. So I developed a true love for the user experience because instinctively, that's what I was always doing. With exhibition design, I was designing for school kids typically and trying to present information and data and visual experience in a physical space and trying to both excite and engage, but have them leave the building informed. So I think that truism has remained with me as the technology cycles have sped up over the years. So yeah, I've been around the block. A few agencies of note. I ran Fjord in the UK for a few years before that business got taken up by Accenture. And I was also involved with the Wild and Crazy family at Us2 as well, launching things like Monument Valley and doing some really great interface and experiential work. So yeah, long and circuitous journey into TPXimpact, but very much enjoying it.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a great intro. Thanks, Scott. And yeah, interesting background. I like that. Like you say, how you came out of the physical space into the digital, but with the same kind of underlying thinking around it. Yeah, sorry. So obviously today we're going to be talking a little bit about good digital experiences. And I guess starter for 10 really is kind of that openish question of, for nonprofits, and as you say, TPXimpact very much focused on organizations that have an impact, a good positive social impact. But for the organizations like those, which is our client base as well, where is the value? What is the value? Why is it so valuable for them to provide a good digital experience?
Well, I think first and foremost, because I mean, it's probably a topic in of itself, right? But I think having that distinction of digital and physical, I think is almost redundant now. The way we interact with content and information and brands and companies and as human beings now, it is essentially a digital experience or a digitally enabled experience. So, an organization that might have a real driver to be raising funds, for instance. If we talk specifically about our sector, not-for-profit or charity or museums and attractions, they're invariably needing to engage their audiences via the platforms and the technologies that their audiences live and breathe in now, as we all do, whether that's apps on our phone in our pocket, or whether that's increasingly in sort of immersive technologies, or are we talking to a human, or are we talking to an algorithm? These are
when do we know?
Right. When do we know? I mean, these are all considerations that I think any organization needs to be not just involved in and present in, but driving in a direction that means something to them as a business as well. So that's my typical definition. And I think in a few years we won't be talking about digital or physical experiences as much as we tend to now. I think that's been a product of digital being a channel or a way of engaging an audience. That's quite old-fashioned now as a concept. Which is, I think, is why we tend to talk not so much about websites and mobile apps these days, and we talk more about platforms.
And do you think there's part of that? Because one of the things that's always struck us about the sector, particularly like say fundraisers, charity fundraisers, a lot of it is, it's very much a people sector. And there's been a lot of value placed on the physical, get together for a challenge event, you bounce off each other, you encourage each other, etc. Do you think that with the enhancement, the developments in technology nowadays, that charities can see how they've overcome that? It's not a barrier, that being physical, but they've overcome that that being founded very much in a physical presence. Is that you're saying, that we can get beyond that now?
I think we can. I mean, obviously, I'm sure we'll touch upon this subject. I mean, I think the constraints of budget for the sector are an obvious inhibitor to actually going all the way sometimes. So I think a lot of the consideration with our clients is, where do you start? And the answer is usually, well, why do you want to do it? Depending on the topic, right? But I think it's less of a consideration, and I think the sector is going to have to get to grips with, where do our people live? What platforms are they living in? How are they communicating? I mean, if I think about this from almost more of a generational point of view, if I was running a charity and needing to raise funds on a regular basis, I'm probably looking at an aging population and an aging audience. In terms of the way I've typically engaged them, and the people that usually are contributing. So actually engaging sort of younger demographics means you're going to have to go where those demographics live. And increasingly, the way a younger demographic buys brands, engages with companies, engages with topics, is via a very flexible set of kind of digital platforms now. If I think about my son, and my son being very much a gamer, he's moved from living in a gaming platform called Discord, and Discord actually being somewhere where him and his friends discuss big topics, they discuss buying things, because that's how they're communicating. And I think the not-for-profit sector needs to get to grips with it.
And there's a number of challenges in there that you've covered already, and I'm sure we will get onto, but is that part of it? And one of the starting blocks is about having to go out to where people are, as opposed to, even 5 years ago, probably we'd have been talking about how we bring people into our presence, into our traditional website, whatever it might be, our app, if we were a little bit out there. Is that where it is? It's about not specifically, but particularly a key consideration is how to be out where, as you said, where your audience is. Very
much so. And I think discoverability being a core part of that, because once you're present, it's not enough to just be present. You need to make people know that you're present. I think if we got onto that Discord topic that I just mentioned, serendipity is a thing. Serendipity is definitely a thing when we're talking about discoverability, and the flexibility of platforms to be able to jump in and out of things means that you tend to have to be present in multiple platforms, whereas a few years ago it was enough to just be on the web, to have a decent website and to have a decent mobile application where you had an e-commerce way of raising funds, for instance. I think it's getting very fragmented very, very quickly. So thinking of experience as being a set of platforms that link together to become a sort of ecosystem for yourself as a company and as a brand is going to be vital for the way you start to design for these things.
Yeah, and if you add on to that, like you say, the fact that not only do you have to have a presence on those platforms, but you have to be able to maintain that presence, to be heard above an incredible amount of noise that's out there already. That's a real, I mean, that as a barrier to entry, maybe, for a non-profit listening to us or thinking about this generally, back to kind of an earlier question of where do you start?
Yeah.
That's quite daunting, I would have thought, when you're talking to clients about their first steps. That must be something that really does, send a few shivers.
Yeah, I mean, I think shivers and excitement too. I mean, I think honestly, a lot of digital transformation in the not-for-profit sector is so often simply about having a robust web and mobile presence that's underpinned by a decent CMS, right? And because of budgetary constraints, that's where the focus is. I think typically when we're engaging with clients and we're talking about transformation over a number of years, we are trying to help them navigate this space. And actually the traditional ways of setting a strategy or finding a roadmap of things that you're going to build next, it's got harder and harder and harder to do in the traditional way. Come up with a business case, get that approved, run that through the gates, get funds to build something, get it out there, hope for the best. I think by its very nature, you have to be a lot leaner. You have to be a lot more experimental. You have to think about diverting some of your budget to those experiments so that you can test and learn, get insight really quickly. And the things that are sticking become things that end up on your roadmap versus the more traditional, build a big business case, get it signed off, draw down funding, build it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's another movement, I think, which certainly in the commercial sector, the bigger brands have embraced and are spending a lot of money that way. We just need to carefully help our clients in our sectors kind of do that in a smaller, leaner way, to maximum impact, basically.
Yeah, but I can see that, as you're saying that, I can hear the challenge. Like you say, I understand that traditional model with the business case, et cetera, very well governed, but it's almost redundant before you get to the point that you can actually invest or enact something, execute a plan. How do you balance the kind of the need for good governance, which has always been really important? I mean, it's important anywhere, but it has been a strong feature of the sector as well. How do you kind of balance that with the need, like you say, to be a bit leaner, a bit fleeter, a bit more dynamic, a bit more innovative, a bit less risk averse, be prepared to fail to learn and reinvent, sort of thing? How do you approach that?
With great difficulty and sensitivity. I think we talk a lot in the agency space about delivering kind of breakthrough experiences to market, and we tend to typically describe that in terms of the outcome, e.g. the thing that you interact with, the thing that you can feel, oh my God, look at that amazing experience that brand X has just launched. Whereas I think it's very, very important to understand the very bumpy way that those outcomes have been delivered. Typically, they've required multiple small breakthroughs and leaping over barriers, internal or otherwise, to even get to the point that you can launch something that has that kind of bigger impact. So often it's smaller cultural company leadership team, product team type things that can be in the way of getting things done. I mean, I use another analogy of the the small grass shoot or the small flower. It's very easy to stomp on it, either deliberately or by accident. So if we took the analogy that the flower is innovation itself, there are usually a lot of reasons to say no to an idea, or to, what, we should experiment in the immersive space. Let's just pick that. Because usually there will be technical constraints, there will be governance constraints. So a lot of what we do is try to help our organizations almost design that kind of innovation function and get small budget allocated to small experiments, e.g. stuff that isn't going to break the bank, but that will return quite a lot of insight quite quickly. And the way we do that typically is to focus on the bigger outcome first. If you think about this starts to get us into kind of lean startup territory, if you like, e.g. and this is where the whole kind of focus on, minimal viable proposition has come from in the end, is could we get to this huge dream outcome that we've designed for ourselves? Could we get there in a smaller set of steps than this huge business case is suggesting?
Okay.
The business cases that suggest there are, 200 features that need to be in place to deliver an outcome. The whole lean approach has been, could we hit the same outcome or half of the outcome with 20 features instead? That's typically, or an approach along those lines is typically the way we're encouraging our client organizations to start thinking and behaving, because it saves money in the long run, right? It saves accident. It saves that horrible, oh my God, we just spent a year designing a website and nobody's engaging with it type thing, right? And it saves a lot of grief in the organization that way too. Plus you learn and you speed up and all of those kind of things. So, we're definitely as much about helping you jump over those internal hurdles as we are about the craft, which is quite often the way we're engaged, is because we're good at building things and designing things. I think we place just as much stress on how can we help you simply move this from a small idea past your executive team to get a small experiment rolling.
No, I get that. I suppose, and so as part of that, then you're helping organizations to be more granular kind of in the outcomes that they're aspiring to be more strategic, I guess, in the long run, but actually to be, I suppose, two things. Firstly, to be more granular, like I say, in the outcome and what they can achieve in a certain time and budget. And then I guess it's the other piece I'm thinking you'll be helping them with then would be how to measure the impact and report back, because you're then building the data, the evidence to justify the bigger and to support the bigger 100%. Investments, bigger innovations. Is that another part of your role?
100%. And you've mentioned the dreaded data word there.
I did.
That is another aspect. There is another aspect that typically we interrogate early on, because this is the way the digital design and development industry has moved on dramatically over the past 10 years. We've moved from a sort of a craft that's been orientated around talking to humans, quite rightly, right? Talk to humans, design things for humans, talk to them about the experiences they're having, and in the design process, be testing that directly with them so that they can tell you how they're feeling and what works and what doesn't work. Absolutely fundamental to designing experiences. But it's got more punchy as we've been able to add an understanding of data to the pot with organizations who are starting to build out data platforms for their businesses. Because when you combine the sort of more ethnographic talking and observing of kind of, you know, user experience design with actually what's really going on from an understanding of behavior and movement and interaction at the touch point, you get this fantastic intersection. Because you know what? Sometimes humans don't quite tell you what they really mean.
What's actually happening. Yeah.
And sometimes they'll say, well, I mean, this is politics, isn't it? Well, I will vote X, but actually they do something entirely different.
Yep.
Exactly the same in the design of experiences, and being able to understand the difference between an A state and a B state by both talking and observing, but also analyzing the data from an A to B state is incredibly powerful. So again, with some of our more cash-strapped organizations, we're saying as much as possible, be trying to divert some budget to a data platform, to having some kind of understanding of interaction from that perspective. It's absolutely vital in the end that you get something reasonably robust that you can actually interpret and understand and use to analyze and interrogate your business. You know, it's pretty fundamental now.
Okay, interesting. And in terms of, seeing as we picked up on the data word, if we then think about that, where you ended up, which is the need to analyze what's going on as well and to drill into it, is that where we start to for some clients, start to move towards the deployment of AI or machine learning at all? Or is that a step too far, a step further?
Yeah. You know, a year ago, I would for this sector or this set of sectors, I'd have said, don't worry about that.
Okay.
I think honestly, the explosion over the past year demonstrates one thing: it's here already. It's everywhere already, and it's only going to get more fundamental as part of the way we engage as humans. I think right now what we're trying to do for our clients is help them understand, first of all, what it is, but what are the implications of adoption? What are the potential use cases? And I think fundamentally, as we would do with any kind of technology cycle, you know, the usual cycles, right? Marketing tends to adopt something first, or the innovators adopt something first. And then there's this sort of explosion of interesting but not that useful kind of applications. Then there's usually a bit of a dip. Then it sort of starts to surface in more functional applications and more useful, more applicable. Those cycles have dramatically sped up.
The speed, yeah.
I mean, you know, it used to be that you could kind of bracket those technology cycles in kind of 3-year blocks, but now it's literally months, or less. Right. If you look at ChatGPT and the new version that's literally just out, and you compare the two in terms of the output, and it's just phenomenal, the speed of this, right? So first of all, we are trying to, first of all, illuminate what is this stuff. 2, should you be worried about it? 3, does opportunity live here? 4, just because you can do doesn't mean you should do. So, you know, there is a sort of ethical and diversity and inclusion angle to this, just as much as there is with any technology. And certainly we would always be advocates of, don't do it if you don't need to, and don't do it if it's not going to have a positive impact. So right now, I think we're in, with most of our clients, we're in a, should we start with the difference between AI and machine learning, right? Because they're not the same.
They're not the same. Yeah, after all.
Yeah. you know, specifically with AI, because everybody's playing, everybody's having fun. But you know, it's the old adage, isn't it? It's like garbage in, garbage out is very, very applicable to machine learning and AI.
Yeah. You tell it nonsense, that's what you'll get back.
All right, and certainly,
at pace.
and certainly, if we take the, oh my God, I mean, AI. If I sort of turn the mirror around and apply it to our own, you know, digital design and development industry, there's a lot of people very, very worried about these applications right now, because it's like, oh my God, like wholesale, will there be job losses? Does this replace what we do? And I think the answer is no, but I view AI in particular, and if you took the image, video, copy aspects of it, that we're all seeing both amazing but also like slightly weird examples of, they are all they're all reliant on effective prompts.
Yep.
So I view them as creative aids and accelerators. And in that respect, our industry and our client industries have nothing to fear, because they are tools like anything else. And those tools can actually help us be more effective, move faster. You know, if you wanted to write a role profile right now, you can probably get a good draft pretty instantaneously from ChatGPT and then refine it. And I would just be sort of placing an emphasis on the refinement to avoid over-reliance is going to be absolutely key. I do think there are going to be quite a few accidents, and probably some really high-profile ones. I mean, what do they say? Like by the end of this year, something like 95% of everything that you see on the internet will be AI, or AI driven.
Yep.
And that's astonishing, because I think that we're getting into trust and ethical territory very, very quickly, you know. So I think it's a fascinating area, and I think the opportunities for it are enablement of the creative process, speed of, you know, getting low-level tasks done. I think there will be a benefit to interaction from an experiential point of view, because we can maybe get more consistent customer service. You know, if we think about things like speech engines and chat bots and things that have been around for a little while, they're all a bit hokey. They're still a bit hokey. I think the algorithms and the power of the algorithms mean that will be a much more unified and beneficial experience. I think the issue is not knowing what you're talking to.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think, you know, once you get into the territory of as a human being not knowing, I think we're in some rather scary territory. And I think it behooves us as designers and clients to basically take an ethical stance on it, broadcast via our interfaces that we're using this stuff if we choose to use it. You know, and take a bit of a stance on it versus just wholesale adoption. It depends on how cheerful I am when I've woken, as to how cynical about it I am. I'm an optimist, so I'm on the side of creative acceleration versus the machines are taking over, because I don't. What did I say to somebody the other day? AI doesn't care, but we do. So you know, once you can't tell the difference between the two things, I think then we've got a problem.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. That's a really good point. And I think you're right. It is about kind of embracing it, accepting it, embracing it, and then working hand in hand with it, because it gives us capability, it gives us the ability to interrogate information at scale, and therefore to provide better services and better supports for people. There's lots of really positive applications available to us, and it's really important not to be scared, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And I think, for not-for-profits specifically, even if we just took the use cases of understanding user behavior and trends, or driving more personalization from a fundraising perspective, or getting a little bit more speedy with test and learn based upon the data that we're building algorithms around, or just modeling the future, it will be playing a role in that. And that's why I think it's sensible, it's sensible and prepared applications that I think will win out. But yeah, I mean, super exciting. I mean, honestly, it's like, I think it's both a fascinating and enormously exciting area that we're in right now, that our clients are going to have to get to grips with.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a really interesting time, especially with all these new innovations and obviously developments, loads of opportunities within that. And I know it's something we've spoken previously with you about, but just thinking of impact and the context this all sits within. Obviously, there's sort of, with these innovations, there is positive impacts, but we have to think of perhaps some more of the negative consequences and the context that we live in today. And I just wondered what kind of your thoughts on the role that sustainability and digital sustainability has to play within creating these digital experiences and with these innovations. Is that something that we should be increasingly aware of and build into these kind of these design processes that we're thinking of, and especially for non-profits when they're looking to design good experiences?
Yeah, I mean, the one and burning topic should be our planet, should it not?
Yeah.
And I think, without getting po-faced about it, I think we've seen 5 to 10 years of organizations, perhaps for the best intentions, but organizations largely ticking boxes around the things that they can get to grips with, e.g. trying to go for kind of net zero, or trying to do the right things in terms of the way the right things are typically described. I think the problem attached to that is I do think there's a general hubris around this topic. You take the digital industry, for instance. I mean, I think, get my quote right, I think the digital industry is responsible for some 4% of global emissions. That's bigger than the aviation industry. That in itself should make all of us, as either practitioners or clients who are dealing with digital platform, kind of sit up and take notice. There is no such thing as digital emissions. It's just emissions.
Yeah.
And the fact that we're dealing with that, means that it's another thing that any organization needs to be standing up to and not being passive about, because it is something that you can have a direct impact with in terms of designing your website, for instance. I think web traffic is on the up, but as a result of that, and as a result of the wholesale adoption of mobile technology, page sizes have increased. I think if we look at desktop right now, it's increased, like since the Paris Agreement, it's like something like up 60% on desktop and 125% up on mobile. These are pretty scary kind of adoption type figures. So we typically position one question with our client. We sort of go, look, if you're thinking about designing web platforms or digital ecosystems, why isn't the planet a stakeholder in your digital projects? The answers that come back are typically things like lack of awareness, lack of breadth or depth of the research, the fact that there aren't any universally accepted standards out there, lots of different ways of calculating this stuff, more cynically hiding behind greenwashing. Let's face it, that's a thing. Just because you say it doesn't mean you're necessarily doing it. And sustainability as an idea is not as easy to codify as something, I don't know, like cybersecurity, where it's so fundamental and given now. If you're any kind of trusted organization, that you need to do certain things to certain standard in security, there isn't the same thing for making your website a lower carbon affair, right? So typically we are trying to gear ourselves and guide our clients through. There are some things that you can look at, and those things are typically energy efficiency. There are actions that you can take to make your software consume less electricity when it's doing its thing. There's hardware efficiency. So again, making sure that your software requires fewer physical resources when it's functional. There's an awareness of how much your bit of the data center is contributing to the electricity grid, and there's maybe a duty of care thing that you can do with the organization, which is to, inform and educate yourselves as well. And there are lots of really tactical things that you can do. And this is where I think we tend to get really, really excited. I think let's just pick website, right? If you were to pick, let's look at the tech side for a second, you can choose a renewable powered hosting provider. You can practice carbon aware development. You can shut down things that aren't being used. You can architect your website from a tech perspective to minimize, the drain on battery on somebody's laptop. You can use modern image formats and lower your page loads. All of these kind of things that are basically built into most websites, you can attack them, And the same with design, right? You can think differently about the way you use images and video. If you've got lots of imagery and video on your pages, it's draining a lot of resource and it's adding to the problem, right? So it's making us think slightly differently about the way we design. And then, if you think about it from a content perspective, we call it rotten. Can you rid your site of any redundant, out of date, trivial, or no longer used content? That's rotten content. See what we did there. You can get rid of that stuff, and it has an impact. Just good UX, ensuring that the right people find the pages that they want to find really efficiently and in a really direct way, reduces the time that they spend on your website. I know it's an oxymoron. You want people to spend more time on your website sometimes. All of that stuff has an effect. And I think this is why we think that this concept of digital sustainability is so vital for experience design. Because in the end, you can make a dent. And it quite often with climate change topic, with sustainability topic, it's overwhelming, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, we can't do anything. But again, just like recycling, with website design and technical design, small things can have a big impact when they're viewed cumulatively. So that's why we think it's important. That's why we think it's vital.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, actually, and it's really encouraging that there's lots of small different ways that, you know, that are practical and tangible that we can do now to make an impact. So I think, yeah, like you said, sometimes it's overwhelming to get started and you don't know exactly where to go, but yeah, it's really encouraging. And I really liked what you said around, you know, think of the planet as a stakeholder in your project. I think that really helps to get us to view you know, them as key within that whole process, which I think is really good, and hopefully help us, you know.
I mean, it does sound a bit I have a dream, doesn't it? But I mean, just the same as we, you know, for the past 10 years, we've been saying things like, make sure design has a chair around your exec table, right? Because we know how that benefits everything. Having a designer in the room makes a difference. The planet should be there too. Yeah. You know, and we think that's just something to focus on. And just the fact that we can offer, you know, just try these 4 or 5 things and it will make a difference and you can stand up and be counted. That's a good movement. That feels like a good movement. Yeah, definitely. I am just conscious of time, so I'm going to ask you one final question. It might be quite a big one, but hopefully you can answer it, you know, quite easily. But just considering everything we discussed today, lots of big topics within there that we could go on for ages about, what would you say is the, you know, the key takeaway that you'd like to leave our audience with in terms of designing and creating good digital experiences? What is something that they should take away and really think about, or even practical next steps for them to really go away and do, really? Yeah, I answer it in a way that might sound flippant. It's not flippant. It used to be a preoccupation. A constant question I used to get was, how can I innovate like a startup? Right? And my answer to that was a flippant answer, but it's still true, which is you start. And I would say exactly the same about some of these concepts that we talked about today, is if you adopt a bit of an experimental attitude and you do it in a small way on small things and see what happens, and then start to roll that into the way you work, it has an exponential benefit on the way the organization feels, but also the products and experiences that you're putting out into the market. So just that change alone, have a little bit of the business that does the experiments, put a little bit of the marketing budget aside to trying to test and learn quickly on a product or a service or a problem, right? That I've seen most movement from companies that adopt that attitude and don't give up, right? Because it tends to just infect the way they work from that point on. Even if it's just, oh my God, I'm glad we did that because we just saved ourselves £1 million. That's a good outcome for a charity, you know. It's a great outcome. And it's like, oh my God, yeah, we would have been really embarrassed if we put that out. That's another good outcome. But yeah, there are other outcomes. But I think it's like, it's that other old adage, isn't it? It's like, when you've got to eat an elephant, the only way you can do it is in small pieces.
That's size chunks. Yep.
Right. Well,
we don't eat elephants, though. No. I
was going to say
we don't.
No, definitely not. Well, yeah, I think that brings us to the end of our podcast today with you. But yeah, just thank you again for joining us. It's been really good to explore these topics with you and get your thoughts and insights on those. So we really appreciate you spending time with us to do that today. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Great to meet you.